Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious, and today we have a topic for you. We're going to be talking about anti-Semitism on the left. Is it a real problem? Is it something that is indicative or based in leftist ideals, like intrinsically? That's the word I'm looking for, intrinsically. Is it intrinsic to leftism, or is it simply something that's been overblown? It's a cudgel being used by people to bully leftists and distract from the real problems at hand. We're going to talk about it. We've brought together a wonderful group of guests, and I want to give them all a chance to introduce themselves, their thoughts on the topic, and then we'll kind of get going. Is Counterpoints coming? We will see. I don't know. He may have some issues. I hope he will be here soon. But either way, the show must go on. And we're going to start with 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔. Go ahead.
So my name is Ali. I think there's less of an anti-Semitic issue. There is obviously anti-Semitism happening within the left. However, I think there's a big conflation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and I think those two things need to be separated.
Okay, we'll get into it. Miss Brianna, please.
Yes, my name is Brianna Wu. I'm executive director at Rebellion PAC. I also run special projects over at Progressive Victory. And yeah, my point, I think we're going to have a lot of agreement here tonight. I think all of us understand that Israel's foreign policy directionally has been very... It's been really destructive and harmful and violent and disproportionate towards the Palestinian people. At the same time, I'm really seeing a lot of discourse on the left that, in my view, certainly falls into anti-Semitism. And I think we're doing the famous leftist playbook where we go after our own. And I think if we're serious about building a coalition to provide real pushback against Israel's foreign policy, I think it's really important that we nip this anti-Semitism in the bud.
Excellent. We'll see how it goes. Karl Max, what you got?
So I think that there is a lot of issues with how people have spoken about this, but I think that the issues come from the same people that we always see saying the worst shit. It is the usual kind of tankies. It's the usual suspects, right? And these people, though they've always been there to always say really stupid things, they've never had a real effect, because these aren't people who actually take action. And really, what are they going to influence in Palestine? I know that these people are annoying and shitty, but I don't think they're, first of all, mostly, I don't think the leftists are anti-Semitic. I think they're people who want to be radical and they want to LARP, right? And I think the people who are anti-Semitic aren't leftists and are people who are just anti-Semites looking for an excuse to be anti-Semitic, right? So all in all, I think that there are issues, but I think that people are focusing on the wrong ones, and especially giving into Israeli propaganda that any criticism of Israel might actually be rooted in definite anti-Semitism, which is something that I see being accused a lot, even when it's not necessarily accurate.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. Thanks for being here and looking forward to the discussion. Last but not least, at least until Counterpoints arrives, Sock Done Left. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is some degree of anti-Semitism on the left on downplaying deaths by Jewish people and refusing to condemn that. Simultaneously, I think it's important to recognize that anti-Semitism on the left is something like 5 times less common than it is on the political right, and anti-Semitism on the right has political power. People like Donald Trump are actively calling for the slaughter of Palestinians. And not in terms of anti-Semitism, but just bigotry on the right has institutional power in a way that it does not on the left. I would totally agree with Karl Max that the types of people who tend to be the most radical, the most like LARPy or whatever, tend to also be the people with the least institutional power. And so, yes, it exists, and yes, it's a problem, but only insofar as any insane beliefs are a problem. Is posadism and wanting a post-nuclear socialism a problem? Yes, but I don't think anyone should give much of a shit. So it's more important than that. It's bigger than posadism, but yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I guess I'll stand in for Counterpoints till it gets here, and I'll give my criticism of what I've seen. Okay. I talked to Lonerbox last night, and his position resonated with me. It's not so much that I see anti-Semitism coming directly from the left, right? They're not going out and hating Jews, etc. But the problem I do see, and it is I think, a problem that is bigger than some on this seem to think, they run cover for it. Anytime we see any kind of anti-Semitic remark by someone in a Palestinian protest or something, when we bring it up, I'm inundated by what I call the butt brigade, right? So what I mean by the butt brigade is when I say, "Oh man, those people pulling down those posters, that's pretty gross." But Israel. But what is the IDF doing in Gaza? But Netanyahu. Like every single time. And I think that this minimizes a very real problem. And while it may not have, these people may not have any institutional power now, we are talking people with millions of followers, millions of sub counts, right? Dwarfing us all, right? Talking about settler babies and things like that. How can we say that's not actually an issue and that's not something we actively should be not just ignoring and poo-pooing away, but actively going ahead and confronting and fighting against? Go ahead.
I think that's dead on, Wick. And I think one of the most basic tenets of morality, like if you go read your Noam Chomsky, is the same moral standards you expect of other people, you hold yourself to, right? So I think if all of us very correctly want to call out racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia on the right, I think it's really important to have our own house in order. So I fully agree with my other panelists have said, I believe Sostan 𝕵𝖎𝖙, who said it was like 5 times worse on the right. I haven't seen that study. That seems very believable to me. I agree with you proportionally. It's probably not as big of a problem, but that should just mean it's that much easier to denounce. And Wick, to your point, anyone that has talked about this anti-Semitism on the left, like my mentions have been a war zone for days here. And I get attacked with the worst stereotypes telling me that like I'm for Palestinian genocide, with people that will not look and say I've been extremely critical of Israel's foreign policy for literally 15 years on Twitter. There are tons of public statements out there they can find. There's my own statements within the last 2 weeks. And it so instantly becomes so heated that it is an environment where it's very difficult to push back on this stuff. So what I need from my friends on the left, I agree with you. We need a change in foreign policy. We do need to denounce this tactic Israel is engaged in that is not going to give them the policy outcome that they want. But we need to be able to call out anti-Semitism on our own side. It's so obvious. It's the most basic requirement of being the thing that you, like having the same standards for yourself you expect of others.
Just to speak briefly to that study that I mentioned, I posted it in the like group chat thing. It's 𝕬den and Hirsch.
I'm looking it over now. Yeah.
Go. What's that?
Cool.
Yeah, I'm looking it over now. Continue though, please. Just
all I was saying on specific statements like, quote, Jewish people have too much power in America. It's like 5% of liberals and 40% of conservatives. So when I said 5, you could even say it's 8 times. It's a lot of young, and this is young conservatives too. Older conservatives are less anti-Semitic, but 𝕬𝖎ers are unironically the future of a third of the Republican Party. So institutional power again.
I hear you, but do you agree that we need to structurally call this out and get our own house in order? Because if we don't, I really worry we're going to become a version of the Republicans.
I think it should always be okay. Go ahead.
Isn't this an issue that we see with every single conflict, though? I mean, if you criticize Israel, you'll get called a Hamas supporter, and if you criticize Hamas, you'll get called like a Zionist. It's just something that will happen, especially with the internet, right? I feel like we need to find the power in saying this is stupid and just ignoring them and then moving on. I know that sounds like kind of dismissive, but I think that I think there's a lot of benefit to ridiculing silly ideas and to just moving away from them, because these people are stupid. I think the best course of action is to make fun of them, make it clear that these sorts of views are silly, they're over the top, they're exaggerated, they're not worth it. I mean, you see me doing this all the time, right? Because that's the way I think you can effectively make ideas, less popular. And I feel like that's kind of the only real way we have, right? I mean, what else are we going to do? You can't really like exile these people or something, you know? You
Well,
can tell them it's stupid
I-
and then kind of move
Yeah,
on.
go ahead.
let's go Stockton left, then Wu, and then yeah.
All I want to say is that I think the amount of criticism should be roughly proportional to the amount of power. And so like vanguardists do have a decent amount of power. I want to say when you look at like all of YouTube views or something, they represent like a fifth of socialist YouTube views, something like that. It's not nothing. They have a lot less power in the real world even than that. They don't represent even a fifth of like the real world socialist movements. They're like a tenth. And socialist movements themselves have like very little power. So I guess the point to me is like, I think it's worth calling out and then being like, okay, I've called out this bad belief. I can't change all these people's minds. Saying it over and over isn't going to change their mind. They hate everything I have to say. So I'm going to focus on who's actually doing like the killing of 9,000 people. It's Israel, right? It's the democratic politicians who are refusing a ceasefire. It's to focus on where the harms are proportionally.
I hear what you're saying. I think I would push back on the idea that we need to mock it as the best thing. I think if you go out there and talk to your Jewish friends right now, they're legitimately hurting, just like your Muslim friends are hurting. I think all of us were probably moved when we saw Hassan crying on Leftovers, or at least I was. But if you go talk to your Jewish friends right now, especially progressive Jewish friends, I've universally found they're in a lot of pain. They feel betrayed. They don't understand how, from their point of view, they've shown up for gay people and trans people and, movement after movement, unionization. It's hard to think of a progressive movement in the United States that has not had a lot of Jewish people there. And they're not seeing their friends stand up for them right now. So I think that mocking is an important tool, but I also think that it's important for non-Jews like me and hopefully the people in the audience to stand up and say, you know what, this doesn't speak for us. We can be critical of Israel's foreign policy, but let's not bring American Jews into this. I think that's actually really important.
Just a real quick housekeeping thing. Counterpoints reached out. He isn't going to be able to make it today, unfortunately. We hope that his situation improves, and that's okay. But I do want to say this as well, right? And this is to Stockton left, just briefly. So we talk about how these ideas don't have institutional power, but we can see the effect that it's having on the left and the division it's causing on the left, which is going to be a problem coming in to the 2024 elections. Look at the DSA. There's been several high-profile people who have abandoned the DSA recently over the recent comments that has been made by certain chapters and things like that. So to dismiss this as if this doesn't have an effect or this is just kind of like nothing, I don't know that's going to be helpful, right? Like, I think that these people are doing real damage to movements that I think are very important, like free healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Like that. And we have Mike from PA, Hassan, several other big names, right, telling their people don't vote for Biden, just clearly just anti-electoralism. Like, is that? I don't. It just bothers me that we're just dismissing this as if it's nothing. I don't know. Maybe it's a.
Well, what I would say to that is most of the people who were anti-electoral before are anti-electoral now. Like, the actual shift has been way smaller. Mike was anti-electoral before. Hassan was iffy. I don't actually recall, but he was not like a strong pro-Biden stan. I guess all I was trying to say, like, this has clearly moved people, and I would say it's moved some people in a bad direction, but the effect has been like way smaller. This part of the left was like bad in that respect before, in my view.
I think that's fair, though. I have to say I did work the 2020 election, and we certainly did take note of Hassan's statement and encouraging his audience to go vote for Biden, and he talked about that. So, there's been a reason that the Democratic Party has done outreach to him because he does have a voice that matters. But I hear you. I want to, just out of the interest of fairness, though, I do want to go to the other side of this and really acknowledge a point that was made earlier. I forget who made this, but I think it's really valid to say that it is often hard to criticize Israel's foreign policy without feeling like people are going to accuse you of being anti-Semitic. And I wanted to give a chance for other people to voice their views on that, because I do think that's a valid issue.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of what the issue is I always ask people like, what is anti-Semitism, and no one really
Yeah.
seems to give me a clear indication. Is it hatred of Jews? Is it destabilizing people, dehumanizing people, whatever it is? If someone
Yeah.
says free Palestine from the river to the sea, that's recognized as anti-Semitic. And yet, if we recognize that like Israel is free from the river to the sea, that's not anti-Semitism for some reason, even though the Semitic people of Palestine were pushed out and the literal land was removed off a map. So I mean, like, I don't get how one is anti-Semitic, one isn't. And I think the big conflation, the issue is the fact that people are anti-Zionist, and while they're anti-Zionist, it gets referred to as anti-Semitic. And I don't think that's fair at all.
I think that, from my point of view, I think theoretically you could have someone that does not want Israel to exist that is not anti-Semitic. I think, though, in practice, it's so functionally disrespectful to such a large number of people that, there is, if you look at the history of how this region was shaped and, why Israel was basically reestablished. I mean, if you look at the history of this region, I do think most American Jews believe Israel should exist. I'm not Jewish. I think it should exist. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's theoretically possible. It's just, it's so frequently linked with anti-Semitism that I think a lot of people make that conclusion.
So my issue is that the way it was formed, if you want to like really sit back and think about it, it was like the Jews were exiled by the Romans and then dispersed through the lands. And then the Holocaust happens, and so now the way I'm seeing it is the Palestinians are now being dehumanized and displaced through the lands, and the only thing left to come would be like a Holocaust for us to feel bad for them and be like they deserve the land. So I mean, like, yes, although I can understand why American Jews believe that like Israel should be a thing, I'm not saying that like the Jewish people shouldn't have a home place, but to displace another group of people for a home place, and then anytime someone says anything negative about that displacement is like it gets referred to as anti-Semitic, when the actual people of the land, the Palestinians, are the Semites who are being displaced. So how's that not
People just don't want it to be an ethno-state.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. But I'm gonna again channel my counterpoints energy today, since he's with us in Spirit Gang and he has possessed my body for the moment. Okay.
So true.
That's absolutely fair, but we have to take context into consideration here. When on the day after the Hamas attacks, people are chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free."
Right.
The day after, they're saying "Intifada, Intifada." We want an Intifada from Britain to Gaza, right? What am I supposed to take out of that, right?
So, although I don't agree with that, I don't agree with the celebration. Do you not understand it?
I can understand, but that understanding doesn't help me
who are displaced, like,
think they're
even though,
okay,
like,
right?
Hamas is a terrorist organization to the people that live in Gaza. You don't understand how this could like possibly be seen as like the initiation.
But it wasn't people in Gaza doing this. It was fucking white people in fucking San Francisco, right, or Las Vegas or Los Angeles, sipping on their lattes, right, chanting this. This wasn't like Gazans who'd been oppressed. It was like fucking white people. I don't know.
There's a slight problem with people who have no ties to the lands having like a lot of opinions. I'm not allowed to tell people to like be quiet or anything because freedom of speech, say what you want, and if you're gonna root for us, I'm with it. But there is a small issue with a bunch of people who have no connection, no ties, and no information on what's happening that are in support of it. Yeah, I can agree with that.
No,
Something I would just
I hear you on that. I just want to say one of the reasons, I mean, look, I want to be honest. I think Israel has the right to exist. I think that it's good for America to have an ally in the region. Hold on, let me finish. But the reason I personally have not gotten really, really invested in talking about like, the history of this region or like relitigating all of that is I think you're right. I think that it strikes me as a little bit similar to cis people with really strong opinions on trans issues, right? So I hear you on that, which is why the WhickTV panel I said yes to was talking about anti-Semitism on the left, which I assume means here in America. So,
so
and
I feel
SDL, I'll let you go, but to be clear, It's globally. Like, we're talking Britain, we're talking Europe, we're talking everywhere,
Fair
right?
enough.
But
Fair enough.
Go ahead.
So Wick talked about adding context, and one of the things I felt worth adding is that from the river to the sea is one of those statements, like Israel has a right to exist, that mean different things from different mouths. From when a leftist, like a hyper-socialist leftist is saying from the river to the sea, their dream is a binational or plurinational, whatever, nation of Israel or nation of Palestine that includes all people, all ethnicities, all together, all as one, egalitarian. When someone like the far right, like a reactionary theocrat says it, they might be saying, wipe Israel off the map, kick the Jews out. So, like, again, same statement, different mouths. The same is true if Israel has a right to exist, which is why I asked you to clarify. Because from a Zionist, Israel has a right to exist means everything Israel does is justified. It's a nationalism statement.
No,
from like the left, it can just be something like, please don't kick out all the Jews.
Yeah, please don't like commit another.
And just one more thing. I think a big problem with this issue and the way we talk about it is for a lot of people, we're watching people speak about this issue like it just happened on October the 7th, and this is the beginning of like all traumas and tragedies. And for the rest of us, some of us are looking at it like it's kind of hard to just be like, well, okay, let's focus on this one individual day when it's like histories have been happening, you know?
Yeah, no, I really hear you about that. And let's just be really honest. I mean, I think that this is an electoral issue, at least here in the United States. I think we are really complicit in not looking at a lot of our areas of foreign policy. I mean, my God, look at how long we were in Afghanistan. I don't think America ever had a really honest conversation about Iraq and the consequences of Bush's decision there. And we certainly have never had a really detailed conversation about what the cost is of Netanyahu's foreign policy, which has been enabled by the United States. I fully agree with that. At the same time, I've got to give you pushback and say, for the same reason, I've been extremely critical of the statement, defund the police. If you want to have a conversation in this country about reallocating the way that we provide public safety in this country and earmark more money for addiction, things like that, mental health, social services, I'm on board with you. But I do think there's a portion of the left that enjoys going to the most inflammatory, toxic rhetoric possible and daring people to disagree with them. And I think this particular statement, I understand that there's a historical possibility of saying this in good faith, but I think a lot of Jewish people read that and it sets off their Holocaust alarm. So I think there are better ways to express that same sentiment.
Well, that's how Palestinian people and Arab people feel when we see I stand with Palestine or I stand with Israel, right? We like you stand with what they've been doing. You stand with like what we see. You stand with the dehumanization of like the Arabs, Muslims, and the Palestinians. You stand with the destabilization of the Palestinians. You stand with the displacing them, and that's what we see when we see I stand with Israel. So it's on the same side. That's why Wick, to your point, the whole like but this but that, there's a point to why we say that. There's a point why we bring up the other side in our arguments, because it's constantly thrown in our faces.
I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of pain on both sides, and I think Muslim people in the United States, I mean, people just forget about the Bush years and the aftermath of 9/11. There's, I mean, just in this country without even getting into the history of that region, right? I think that's really fair. And I would hope in my public statements, I have not minimized that, because it's not something I would want to do. I do see my Jewish friends hurting, though. And I do want to speak up about that.
In the, again, in the spirit of counterpoints, that's, frankly, Ali, I love you, but that's kind of bullshit, right? So let me tell you why. We don't have people going around ripping off the posters of killed Gazan children, right? We don't have that happening.
We don't have posters of killed.
That's a good point, too. Why not? Why are, instead of putting up posters of the killed Gaza individuals, they're instead ripping down the posters of killed Israeli kids. And not even just Israeli kids. There were Thai people there, people of other nationalities. They just, again, we see video after video of people just going around ripping them out. And even worse, there are people who run cover for that. Very, again, big streamers, Remlo.
Are actually like bringing hostages to like London or something? Do you think that they're actually like bringing the hostages like to those places? Because it's not like, what would the
what do you think the purpose of this posters
are?
are?
For a reason, right? It's so they can barter with them.
The purpose of posters is to spur sympathy
for the Jewish people that are being affected by this war and conflict. That's what those posters are for.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do
Again,
the
and
same
why
with
rip them down?
Palestinians.
What
You're
what
not
possible
doing anything about it. You just don't know
non-anti-Semitic
what's
reason
on it.
could you have for ripping those down?
Wick, what I would point you to is there was a
Because
protest on I forget which campus, maybe Harvard, where they did a die-in. Like 50 students lay down on the ground and they died for the purpose of like saying, hey, this is like we're observing mass death and this is a pro-Palestine event. And a few Jewish students went in and tried and take pictures of people's faces to try and like dox them. Essentially, all I'm trying to say is like there have been people tearing down like pro-Palestinian events and people tearing down pro-Israel events. Like it's I don't know if it's one for one. It's not fully one side.
And again, we don't have crowds and mobs going to a plane, right? And looking for Gazans or Palestinians. But we do have mobs going and looking for Israel, for Jewish people. Not Israelis, Jewish people specifically, right? So we can say that, like, yes, there are bad things being done by both sides. Absolutely, I agree. There are people who are just using this chance to let their Islamophobia fly free. I think we can't excuse or minimize the anti-Semitism, and that's my concern. Is that's what's being minimized right now, is the anti-Semitism.
Wait, that's actually to the point where that's the point where, and I'm not trying to bring this up for a gotcha. That's where I got blocked by Brianna. Is she was bringing up the minimization of anti-Semitism, and I'm not gonna lie, there is no like. It's not a minimization of it. It's just that like we're in Dearborn right now, and with the Muslims in Dearborn, do you know how many threats people have gotten on their doors, on their houses? There have been people calling for a hunt of Palestinians in Dearborn. This is something that has been happening and we've been dealing with. It's not a minimization thing. It's a collective thing. Muslims and Arabs should be with the Jewish people who are feeling the anti-Semitic rhetoric. We should be standing together. And that's why at least when I have these conversations, that's why I bring up the other counterpoints, because it's like, hey, I'm showing you that I'm dealing with the same thing. This is us.
At one tiny note on that thing that you're talking about, the crowd, that was in Dagestan, like a very conservative part of Russia. Like those were not leftist land back college students coming in.
Sure,
That's all.
but again, like I said in my initial statement, it's not so much that the leftists are doing this, it's the leftists are excusing or minimizing it.
Yeah. So
I'm sure some are.
I was brought up,
ahead.
so I just want to say a thing about that. Now that I know you, have talked to you, I see where you're coming from. Like, drop your Twitter in the DM. I'll unblock you. Please understand,
building bridges.
There's been so much static that's come my way that I've probably blocked 500
understand.
people. Okay,
I understand.
So
That's why I didn't go
that's
off.
one thing. Second thing, Wick, I need to tell you, production-wise, your mic is very hot, and you should turn your gain down.
Hold on.
Third thing I wanted to say is, am I correct on this call that all of us would like to see less violence towards Palestinians and think that the actions are disproportionate? Does anyone disagree with that statement here? Okay,
I'm sorry, what was the statement again?
That the violence towards Palestinians at this point is beyond disproportionate and that it is counterproductive at this point. We all agree with that, correct?
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying
great.
it's good, I agree.
Fantastic. So this would be, I tend to be really pragmatic. Wick works with me on stuff. This is my pragmatic suggestion. If you want to form a coalition in the United States and create political pressure on Democrats to not enable the worst kind of abuses and to really like put conditions with Netanyahu, something I think we have forfeited and not done a good job with for 16 years now. If you're interested in us having that political point of view represented, it's really important that we take the temperature down and that we don't fall into anti-Semitic tropes, because every second that we are fighting each other about this is one that we can't get to the real issue. I would posit that the same progressive, democratic Jewish people that feel very alienated and hurt by the anti-Semitism right now, I would posit that they are probably going to be some of the strongest, most important allies that we all need for that policy objective. So I think it is in all of our interest that we take the temperature down, acknowledge people's hurt, really stop our own side from doing this stuff, and then refocus on what we want the foreign policy of the United States to do. I think that would be a very pragmatic way forward.
I think to approach this though, and to properly call out the anti-Semitism, we need to call out the Islamophobia as well, though, right? Because I see a lot of like anti-Palestinian sentiment, which does seem to be rooted in like a dislike of Muslims, right? And I feel like if we have these people who are so regularly calling out anti-Semitism, often for things that might not necessarily be rooted in anti-Semitism, like taking down posters that are perceived to be propaganda, like Israeli propaganda, right? A lot of people aren't going to do that with anti-Semitism in their heads. And so therefore, if you like continue to apply that everywhere, and then without even acknowledging the other side of it, like the rampant Islamophobia involved with how people treat Palestinians and how people talk about like the people there, I think you're not going to make any progress. So you need to acknowledge both things.
First thing, is my mic better? Is this better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, okay, just wanted to make that clear. But see, this is like max, right? We make all these excuses, right, for the people, like maybe they don't have any hate in their hearts. Maybe it's just propaganda that they're trying to forcibly rip apart and things like that. Maybe. But then, oh, we got to talk about Islamophobia now. Islamophobia is a real problem. The stuff that's happening in Dearborn is a real problem. But we can't talk about it while at the same time minimizing or making excuses for it. Why can't we just say, why can't we simply say, yeah, the people who are, if you are ripping off the posters of kidnapped kids, you're probably a bad person. And if you're going around Dearborn talking about hunting down Palestinians, you're probably a bad person. We don't need to run excuse for either of these groups, either of these people, right?
Do you truly not see how anybody could see the posters of missing children who they know are like in Palestine being held hostage by Hamas? Do you not see how people seeing those posters internationally, like in America, a whole ocean away, might think that is just propaganda?
I think that if they think that, that's rooted in their anti-Semitism.
This is the issue. This is the issue. You're falling for the Israeli propaganda by doing that, right?
I think it's propaganda. I'm anti-Semitic.
Could it not be propaganda, Wick? Are you sure?
Okay. So, when something happens in Gaza, and we see a bombed out ruin of Gaza, we put that on the news. We post, but it's an ocean away. What am I to do about it? Why do we do that? To spread awareness of what's happening.
Missing children posters,
right?
Though,
to put awareness of what's happening, what actually happened, right? So that at the same vein, the people putting those posters up of missing kids, right? Of kidnapped, not missing, kidnapped, to be clear. Kidnapped kids, kidnapped workers, kidnapped individuals. Yeah, they're trying to spread awareness. And I mean, we don't have to, make it into something that's...
And when the people rip off the posters, it minimizes that awareness. And when people say that Israel has the right to defend itself, it minimizes that awareness, right?
Wick, I guess I would just say awareness is maybe not the right word to use, because I don't think there's anyone who's not going to be aware of like the crimes involved here. The point of it is to spur support for Israel and opposition to a ceasefire. Like just more concretely, I don't think I don't think you're aware of this. Here's a face of a kid who was kidnapped. It's support the bombing. That's the point.
I don't think so. I think it's to keep the pressure through the State Department and I think it's just to make this a mission priority. And honestly, hold on just 1 second. I'm not Jewish, but I would guess that the memories of the Holocaust are really like playing into this for a lot of Jewish people. So I understand being angry. I understand perceiving this as propaganda. I don't agree, but I think it's so counterproductive for any of the policy goals that it sounds like we all agree on, because I think a lot of people are going to interpret this as anti-Semitism. I just want to be honest. I do.
Yeah. So my thing is I've been on the stance that like Palestinians are Semites and anti-Semitism applies to them as well. I don't think it's Islamophobia that's happening to them. And so like when people are talking about when people are consistently throwing anti-Semitic at like Arabs and Muslims and the people that are
if we just used anti-Jew, would it help? It's just a word that bothers you.
If we just said
it's honestly not the word. It's like the idea behind the word that like we're minimizing the effects that are happening to like Jewish people and the Israeli people, but for some reason no one wants to talk about the minimizing effects that are happening to Palestinians and the Arabs in the town.
Just real quick, what do you mean we're like, look at what happened with the not Al-Aqsa, there was a hospital, right? that wasn't minimized at all. Media, like mainstream media, New York Times, etc., ran with this and blew it up all out of proportion, immediately blaming the IDF, right? Sans any evidence, right? So to act as if the mainstream media is minimizing Palestinian casualties is just counterfactual. We look at this is saying that's actually being looked at through a microscope and being gone over, right? We are all throughout every major news network is calling this shit out, right? I just don't I don't see it. But again, we have people on the left, and this is the topic today, running cover for the people who are ripping off. We have people on this panel who are running cover for the people going around ripping off posters of kidnapped kids. And I think that's gross. I'm going to be real with you.
I would oppose it. All I would just say is that I think that you are seeing high emotions. So like people are talking about there's threats to Palestinian families. There are like disruptions of pro-Palestinian events. In fact, that disruption has been going on for decades, as has disruption towards like pro-Israel events. All I would say is I think there's a difference between saying maybe this is high emotion, maybe this is people acting irrationally and like actively supporting it, which some leftists do, but I don't know that anyone on this panel is saying like, yes, rip down all those posters. Those kids don't deserve to be seen.
Max,
Are you
saying that we should rip down the posters? Be honest.
I don't think so from an optical point. I think that it is propaganda.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is propaganda. I don't think there is absolutely any use to having missing children's posters in countries, thousands of miles away, especially when you're responsible for like several times more missing children as a state and you're already being internationally supported anyway. I don't see the actual benefit in it, and I think it's very clear it's part of Israel's attempt to portray Palestinians as murderous and in need of.
What do you think it portrays the Palestinians or pro-Palestine movement when you see videos of people ripping these posters on? Do you think that helps? Do you think that's a good propaganda?
That's why I'm against it optically, right? I think it's a terrible move, and I think it knows how they did it.
Right.
I do just want to note that we are conflating Hamas and Palestine in this conversation quite a bit, and I also don't think that's. I think that's a sleight of hand that is not very helpful for helping people understand this.
Well, when I'm talking about Israel doing that to levy, negativity towards Palestinians, I'm saying that because Israel doesn't differentiate between Palestinians and Hamas, not because I don't. I definitely do. Israel doesn't know, and that's like we're talking about what they're doing, right?
Well. Yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from. Like when they're willing, like what was it 2 days ago to kill 4,000 civilians to get one Hamas commander? It's kind of hard.
It wasn't 4,000.
I mean, they literally can go all animals,
How
right?
many was it? Has that been updated?
Well, it just wasn't 4,000. Like some number in the hundreds. That's all.
Oh,
yeah,
thank God. Oh, thank God.
I think 400.
Still bad, right?
Yeah, I just want to put a pin in that.
People.
Like when we were saying, oh, it was hundreds and not thousands. Oh, thank God is a, this is a state we're at. Like it's
That's where we're at though now. We're at that point where we're like being thankful that it's not 1,000 and it's 100.
Yeah.
It will be 1,000. I mean,
that's why I think you're seeing like these emotions being so high in the conflict is like you're seeing people take sides, right? It's instantly being like people are I stand with Israel, which means they're hating Palestine, and the people that are standing with Palestine that are hating Israel. And it's because of like the history that's come with it, and now people are having these conversations about the acts that are happening today, as if the acts that happened like these past few weeks is the history. And I think that's where like the arguments and the anti-Semitism and the huge emotions you're seeing. That's why you're getting like the amount of protests that you're seeing filled with like a lot of negativity and anger. And it's because when people are protesting it instantly becomes, oh, you're celebrating Hamas, when it's like, no, that isn't what was happening. And you can talk to people and you could know that wasn't happening. If anyone was going to experience anti-Semitism, if anyone has any right to be anti-Semitic, it would be my parents or the parents of the people that grew up in Dearborn that fled their countries from the wars that happened with the PTSD of the shit that's happened to them. They would be the anti-Semitic ones. And yet my dad, from a very young age, when I went up to him, when I was a child, and I was like, do we hate the Jews? He looked at me, he said, no, Jewish people did nothing. They're just Jews. They are just people. We are anti-Zionists though. And that's my father, who is not like he came over here as a foreigner. If any group of people would be anti-Semitic, it should be the people in the Muslim majority city and Arab majority city, and unfortunately, it's just not.
We should also discuss how We should
Go
also
ahead,
discuss
Max,
how
and
Israel.
then Wu, if you wanted, and I have something to say. Go ahead.
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. We should also be discussing how Israel isn't actually protecting all Jewish people and it's protecting Zionists, right? Like we have seen cases and reports of Israel going after non-Zionist Jews. So I think to act like protecting Israel is to protect Jews is just kind of wrong, and it's falling for their like line, right? You need to be aware that Israel isn't out to protect all Jews. It's out to protect the ones who, want to protect Israel's interests, and not just anybody. And by protecting Israel, you're not necessarily actually just like being anti-Semitic or whatever. You could just be falling into some kind of basically just an id-pol trap.
I don't know. I think, I just want to make y'all aware, you're falling into a lot of stereotypes and statements, like assuming like Jewish propaganda. I mean, just a lot of stuff that I
Wait,
gotta
are you
tell
saying
you.
Israel just doesn't make propaganda?
I
What are you
think
trying to
all
say? What do you mean by
nations,
that?
I think all nations make propaganda, but it's
Yeah.
like,
So
Well, let
if I
her
can
finish, and
finish,
then you can
yeah.
respond. Go ahead.
I don't
Sorry.
know. I really feel the hurt here, and I genuinely appreciate the chance to engage with both of you on this. I really hear that and acknowledge it. At the same time, I just want to be honest and say the way you're talking about Israel and the Israeli people, it just feels kind of dehumanizing.
not the Israeli people.
Right?
I have
Sure.
Israeli friends. I went to Israel a few years ago. I'm good. I know like young Israeli people who are anti-Netanyahu and
You
are
got
totally
many Israeli
normal,
friends.
right?
Yeah, you have a Israeli
right.
friend.
Yeah. No, but like actually, I went there. I had like a whole school exchange thing, and it was great. It was nice. They were lovely people, right? Because there are tons of lovely people there. That's why I don't understand why you're falling for the line of defending the state and saying like calling out Israeli propaganda. It's now anti-Semitic because it's Jewish propaganda. You are falling for the thing. This is
First
what
of all,
Israel
it's not
wants you to
proven
do.
that those posters came from Israel, or if there is evidence, I've not seen it, and that's the kind of thing
What?
you're just
Okay.
assuming. That's very difficult.
then it would still be-
makes it
Let
hard
her
to
finish,
hear.
and we'll have it back and
It
forth. I
makes
promise.
it
Sorry,
hard to
sorry.
hear the rest of what you're saying when you're lapsing into statements like that. It feels like I acknowledge the hurt, but it feels like the hurt has gotten you to a place where it's kind of driving your evaluation of the situation.
But I don't really see how this affects my evaluation of the situation. I'm still saying it's a terrible thing those people died. I'm still saying that we should be anti-Hamas. I'm
Sure,
saying
I'm
that
talking
those
about the
posters
posters,
serve
to be clear. Yeah.
they have no purpose. Do you think they have a genuine purpose
Yes.
outside of swaying public opinion?
Yes.
Do you think
What
that
would be
they
that
will
purpose?
find a Hamas hostage in Melbourne?
This is what I think you're missing. I have had, a really close friend of mine that I work with was actually in Israel on October 7th in the midst of the attack, tried to get out. It was difficult for him. A lot of people that I know have been extremely worried about their friends and families like being targeted or harmed by this. And by the way, here in Massachusetts, we've got a story about a Palestinian family that's trapped in this war zone on the other side of it, and they can't get out, and the State Department is entirely uninterested in helping them, right?
My mom was in Lebanon when it happened.
Oh,
And she
I'm
had
so
she had
sorry to hear
flee.
that.
Yeah, so it's like a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of people with a lot of things.
Yeah. So this is my point here. I hear what you're saying about seeing that this could be propaganda. I think another way to look at it is, do you remember after 9/11 when a bunch of Americans went and put pictures up on, of their loved ones that were missing? I think there's a catharsis of this. And I think it's people like looking out after their neighbors. I think that's a very charitable interpretation of it.
Those were
I
their
think
neighbors,
that's some
right?
part of it. Yeah.
I would agree with that if I felt like it was actually like being a community driven thing. But I
don't
don't
you
know.
feel that
Everything
way?
I've seen from it just seems like the posters just show up in different places. And I don't really see much talk about people being like, okay, let's organize, let's do this, and we'll put it all out there together, and then we can spread awareness. I've just not seen anything about that. But would you, Brianna, agree that a lot of Israeli propaganda does get dismissed under the like line that it is just like anti-Semitic to acknowledge that it is propaganda?
I think that it's really hard to have a conversation in this country about, our foreign policy because of forces like, AIPAC. I was really glad to see AOC call out the downsides of that. And yes, I would certainly agree with that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I just lagged for a second. Can you tell me what you said again?
Sure.
Excuse me.
I basically said I do agree with you.
Oh, based. W.
Do we have 5 for 5 anti-APAC on this panel? Wick, are you
Yes.
APAC #1 hater?
So I will say this.
They have every right to do what they're doing. I want to be
Yeah.
clear. I'm just saying, like, I think they're often, I agree that they often like lapse into racism, and I think they've enabled some bad people in our politics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed. So yes, we do have a 5. I don't know if hater is the right word, but 5 out of 5, right? It's like when people ask me if I'm pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, I don't know how to answer. I'm pro both, I guess. I believe both need to exist. But then,
What is that? Are you two-stater, dead hardcore two-stater?
so I'm going to quote Nelson Mandela on this.
Oh my
right?
God.
We support Palestinians' right to exist, but we also support. This is true. This really happens, right? Like Nelson.
Yeah, but note
Mandela,
the word Palestinians and Israelis is what he's going to say.
well, Zionists. He said Zionism.
Oh God,
right?
did he?
Yes, he did.
Let me look that up.
Look it up. It's a quote.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And again, like this idea that what bothers me about this is like where were all of you when all this shit was going down in Syria? Where were all of you? Where were the protests when all this was going down in all these other countries? Like where millions were displaced or died, right? Like maybe you guys, because you guys are great, were speaking out against it. But most people, nothing. We had nothing. And so it makes me wonder why, like, no Jews, no news. That's the thing. Like, if a Jewish person didn't do it, then we're not going to talk about it. Right?
That seems completely wrong with the Ukraine war. It very clearly is me. It's not about Jewish people. It's about white and rich people.
But those are Europeans, right? So.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Like the cover, like I don't know if any of y'all have even seen coverage of the Congo, right? Something like 6.9 million people displaced. And I don't know if you'll have seen any coverage of that, but that's not because there's no Jewish people involved. It's because there's no rich or white people involved, in my view.
Yeah. So I want to come back to, do my fellow panelists not believe in the 2-state solution? Because I am almost a 3-state solution believer. Like I'm not completely convinced of that, but I do think both of them have the right to exist.
I'm a 2-state
do y'all
Andy
not
myself.
agree with that?
Pro-Israel, pro-Palestine. Both have a right to exist, and both should.
I'm not. I'm not.
Please.
The division of the lands for Palestine and having it be like 2 separate lands as one country makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't think that Israel will ever allow for Palestine to have these 2 countries exist in like literally around them. I'm more towards just like giving the Palestinians the land and then having it be an egalitarian, like everyone can live there. Because Jewish people live amongst the Palestinians right now, and it's okay. Christians live amongst the Palestinians right now, and it's okay. Like, they can live together. I don't understand why people think they can't.
Well, because in certain countries, Christians, Jews have been... Well, what happened to the Jews in Damascus in the 90s? Where'd they go?
So
Where'd they
there
go?
was a lot of mass displacement, right?
Yeah. What happened to the Christians in was it Jordan or Lebanon a few decades ago?
I don't know. The same
Where'd
thing
they
that's
go?
happening to the Palestinians now.
Yeah.
This is just like how the lands have operated like this forever. They've been in conflict and in wars forever, and to act that like this is just like an anti-Semitic Jewish problem is not.
But
real.
the reason I'm pointing this out is because when you say that you don't want a 2-state solution, that you don't think it's feasible, you don't think it can work, and you say you want a solution where it's all equal.
Because Israel won't allow it, not because the people won't accept like anything.
I do believe it's Hamas that has I mean there have been peace proposals brought forward. They've been sabotaged by Hamas. I mean that
and there have been
is
peace
true.
proposals over the sabotage by Israel.
Yeah, both extremists on both
The
sides.
peace
That's what I'm
proposals
saying.
are always like conditional
One-state
and
solution solution
Hamas
is
won't
not a
correct.
give
solution.
up.
That's my
That's
whole
correct.
point, is that there are extremists on both sides who are in power, who have massive amounts of influence and resources, who will not
Yes.
allow this to happen for a variety of reasons. And so that's why we need a two-state solution, because, again, if you just give the power to the Israelis, they're going to displace the Palestinians. But if you
All right, then.
if you eliminate Israel, what happens to the Jews? And we can look
Are you
at
for
all the other
two-state
countries in
solution
the
with
region
equals-
to get an idea, right? Where
Can
are
we get
they?
Can we get an equal split of the lands, or do we just go to the borders that we have now? Because that's not a two-state solution.
I don't think the borders that we have now would be the solution, right?
Okay, so what would be the solution?
It is beyond the scope of this panel to divvy up Israel,
Which is
right,
why,
in Palestine right now.
Don't
But
go around just saying I'm a two-state solution person, because there is no answer. You're never going to get an answer for a two-state solution. It's going to be a one-state solution. It's either going to be Israel or Palestine, and I'm always going to opt for Palestine.
Oh, I don't agree with that. I think there are a lot of historical examples of societies with long histories of not getting along, like figuring out through the diplomatic process a way to do this. I think, stable situations involve mutually entangled interests. And I think my analysis would be that the fundamental problem right now is there are not mutually entangled interests between these two. There's just not a way for them to do trade. There's not a way for them to, pursue security together. And I think until we have a framework to arrive at that, I think it's just going to be this slow war in the region that's not good for anyone. It's not good for Palestinians when you've got the Netanyahus that keep their power through human rights abuses. And it's not good for the Israelis to have rockets fired into their homes and hold on. And we're to the point that they have to have apps announcing when it's safe to be in certain areas because rocket attacks are so frequent. I think until we have a real, I do think it's two-state solution is possible, but I think it's going to take a real diplomatic effort in the region. I think we're going to have to bring in other partners, and I think it's going to involve like economic investment by the rest of
It's
the
even
world.
simpler than that.
I
That
don't know
two-state
what
solution
diplomacy
will
you're
never
gonna have
happen
for-
while the right holds power in Israel, and the right's going to
Fair.
hold. And so I'm just saying, like, unless the United
There's
States
good
opposes
news.
Israel or something,
There's good news on that, right?
Yeah.
Netanyahu's
Netanyahu is
polling is in
They-
the shitter.
they hate Netanyahu, but they might like Likud, or they might go to the right of him, which is what you'd expect after like violence. So
Especially after
but we
their
didn't stay
9/11,
with
right? They
Bush
just had an
forever.
atrocity happen to which it is the Israeli. They're recognized as the Israeli 9/11. You're not going to see a piece from these two people because the diplomacy argument is like it's tough because as we can understand that like the Jewish people have been oppressed and then they need a state to feel safe and all that, correct? And I'm with that. Like the Jewish people don't deserve to be hated just for the sake of being Jewish, and they deserve to feel free and comfortable in a land. That's not an issue. The issue is you took this land and called it Israel and placed it in the middle of a world where there were already so many issues that in what world was this going to be like not an issue for the people? We looked at the world and said, the Jewish people are hated across the world. Where should we put them? In the center of the heated conflicts? Like, how does that make any sense?
Because that's where they wanted to go, man.
That's their holy land.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, so that's where they wanted to go to find peace, and yet they got placed into a place where they're extra hated. I don't. How does that make sense?
I just want to get real with you and say there's no future where the United States is going to let Israel be eliminated. I don't think that's realistic. I think
Yeah, I
that
know.
is just
There is a future where
Well,
Palestine
let her
gets eliminated,
let her
and that's
finish, and
happening.
then you can respond. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I agree with you. So I think, I agree with you. Like America has a long, history of turning a blind eye to atrocities in the Muslim world.
Okay.
Just for one example, we've never had an honest discussion about the, 150,000 civilians minimum by the most conservative estimate, like slaughtered in Bush's Iraq War II. Like we've never even talked about that as a country. So my analysis of this, because I do want to protect Palestinian life, and I don't want to see atrocities in that region, is that's why we need to be leaning into the diplomatic process. Because I think if you give Americans a choice between turning a blind eye to more atrocities towards Muslims and wiping Israel off the map, I think that's a calculus that you're going to lose.
There are
I mean,
two.
we're seeing
Before we
people
go on,
right now
before we go on.
claiming that Israel was never a land, was never a state, was never even a recognized groupings of people, and if that isn't dehumanizing and just I don't know.
Okay, two things before we go on. $5 from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. Why aren't they differentiating between Israelis and the Israeli government? I think we covered that earlier. $5 more from 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. Ask any of these people who they think can lead Palestine to peace. I doubt they can name one person.
I can't.
Jeremy Corbyn, put him in power.
Oh no. Okay, I get it. We're gonna meme. It's meme time, right? But that is a valid question, right? Yep. And this is a question that strikes at Israel too, because after they are done eliminating Hamas, what next? Who has power in that region? And I don't think anyone
people to have power in the region.
What?
There aren't going to be people that have power in the region if you keep killing everybody.
Well, so to answer it more concretely, Israel's Ministry of Information put out a document that got leaked. It wasn't supposed to be public. And they said there's basically three options. One is that the Palestinian Authority, their power gets extended back to Gaza, and that means Fatah gets back in power, probably. The second option is genocide, more or less. And I forget what the third one was, but it was some midway between the two. The option 3 was kick everyone out.
I don't think Fatah wants to lead in Gaza.
No, that's what option 2 was. Go in and don't set up a government of known ideological apparatus. Israel has an incentive to put Fatah back in power out of fear that Hamas too arises, is all. So
Jesus.
That
is dark.
I mean, that's literally what that's what the document says. So.
It's a fraught situation, and if anyone thinks I'm pro-Israeli in that, they are wrong. I am 100% against any displacement or genocide in Gaza of the Palestinian people. But we have to be real with this. We have to be honest that Israel is never going to go away. The United States won't allow it. Israel itself won't allow it. People have tried before. Arab countries, 4 times have tried to wipe them off the map? And each time Israel has said, no fucking way, and kicked their asses, right? So Israel isn't going anywhere, and given that that's the reality of the situation, the two-state solution is the only way. But I want to talk about anti-Semitism again. Bring this back a little bit, right? I want to bring it back, okay? Do we not think, and this is another thing we need to tackle, when Israel and Israelites see all the anti-Semitism that we say is no big deal, I do believe that it actively pushes them, as the Sockdon Left said, to the right. Right?
I agree.
So one of the reasons we should be combating this, one of the reasons we should be shouting them down, even though we think they have no institutional power, is because they do drive institutions to make decisions, and such as Israelis to vote more for Netanyahu than they would otherwise, because they're looking at it and what are their options here, right? They could get wiped off the map, or maybe have someone, they could have October 7th again and again and again, like one of the Hamas leaders said just the other day. Or, right, they can have someone that will stand up for them and protect them. So, again, all this anti-Semitism does is push them towards more extreme, more authoritarian, more warlike solutions. So, what would your answer to that, Max and SDL, be?
I agree with this sentiment, but I think part of the issue is caused by people like you conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Obviously, Jewish people are going to feel uncomfortable if there's constantly people screaming about anti-Semitism.
People like
and then
me.
When they look at it, it's
where
just
have I pointed? No. Just real quick. You said people like me who conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Can you point to one instance which I have done?
The posters thing, which is something that Brianna acknowledged could be perceived as Zionist propaganda.
Well, I don't acknowledge that. I disagree with Brianna here. I think
don't
that's
acknowledge
just
that could be.
It's not anti-Zionism. It's just
you don't see
anti-Semitism.
any case under which.
But what critique of the Israeli government is made by ripping down these posters?
Well, just that they shouldn't spread their propaganda in other people's countries, really.
What other country do we say that to? Do we do that with Ukraine?
I think if we
do that with China?
Of Ukrainian children in Chicago, people would probably find that kind of weird, right?
No one would rip them
if it
down.
Were kids who were kidnapped by Russians. No one would rip
I
it
mean,
down. That's not
during
true.
World War One, actually, that happened. Germans renamed themselves to Anglo names so they wouldn't get discriminated against. I just like the history goes way, way beyond like Israel of people being really fucked about wars.
So yeah, I just reject that. If that's your evidence that I've equated anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, I think, well, people can judge whether or not that's a valid critique on their own. But
Yeah. I just want to clarify, just in case this gets clipped. I understand the argument. I understand your perspective, but I don't agree with it. So, but I do understand where you're coming from.
And okay.
Yeah, no, so to speak to that, I agree that it actually is useful to have stuff like condemnations of Hamas for the purpose of coalition building. At the same time, something that people have like repeatedly talked about is that demands of that are like sort of her like there was I want to say it was October 12th or something, like 5 days after the attack, and Palestine's ambassador to the UK went on Sky News or something and was asked 2 or 3 times, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? When he came on to talk about how his family members had been killed in Israeli bombing. And so I just want to say, like, I think it's useful and it's correct. At the same time, I feel like some people somewhat correctly can feel like this is so much of a demand that it shifts the conversation away from the actual harm that's happening right now. The kids that are dying right now.
But don't you think that's really minimizing, like October 7th? I mean, there are a lot of Jewish people that feel, swear to God, actual trauma about this. I don't think, I know this sounds Weasley and like it's straight down the middle, but it's said with real, I genuinely believe this. Don't you think you can acknowledge both?
Yeah, but wouldn't you also be weirded out if every time some Jewish person complained about feeling uncomfortable, someone was like, "Hey, but you know the IDF." What
that's
tell us
happening.
quickly?
Israel
Like,
and the IDF.
Like I told you about the butt brigade, right?
That's exactly what happens. I can point to like
yeah, and it makes them uncomfortable, right? So like, why wouldn't the same be true vice versa?
It is true. That's my point.
Right. Okay, so we're on the same page.
Don't you agree
right,
then?
okay.
Sorry. Do I agree with what specifically?
Do you agree? I'll take it. Do you agree that people often use like the "Do you condemn Hamas" thing unnecessarily?
Just real quick. Just real quick, gang. If you're trying to donate to me, and this is important, this is more important than anything we're talking about right now. Okay, if you want to give me money, right? Super chats. If you want me to ask a specific question to the panel, that's on YouTube. If you want to like throw bits my way, throw a bunch of bits my way, I'll try to read your message on Twitch too. Okay. Carry on.
Of course I do. I do Dino Badala's show every other week. He's a former SNL writer who is on Sirius XM. And, you know, he talks about how people expect him to condemn Hamas every 30 seconds, right? When he talks about this stuff. So, of course, that's true. But I'm saying there's also a lot of pain on the American Jewish side with people that do conflate them with the government of Israel, which, again, I do not support. So to come back to Wick and the topic at hand here, my message is very straightforward. I do not support Israel's foreign policy at all. I don't. I do absolutely strongly support my Jewish American friends that have nothing to do with Netanyahu. And I think that it's really important that those of us on the left, if we're serious about getting the policy outcomes we want, get to be really vocal about that, because we are headed into another stupid, destructive cultural war that's going to result with the Republicans in charge in 2024, and then they're going to turn Palestine into a parking lot and let Netanyahu do whatever he wants.
I think a coalition needs to be formed with the people who feel with Israel, like the American Jews who feel just like complete anti-Semitism in the world, and the Palestinians and the Arabs who feel like the same thing. I think these people need to get together and talk, and then maybe that's the form of if these two, if the Jews and the Palestinians, and they formed a coalition of people, and they could probably get some diplomacy pushed through America. They could have the conversations in America, but like if both parties are consistently going to, like, if the Jews are going to look at the Arabs and be like, well, we're going through a tragedy, and the Arabs are going to look at the Jews and go, they're going through a tragedy, and we're not going to align our tragedies together, we're just going to end up fighting each other based off of a group of people that none of us have anything to do with.
I
300
hear
bits.
you,
it's
but
a
why
focus on
would
that.
a Jewish person get in a coalition with that? Just being really honest, when you've stated on the show really openly that your preferred policy outcome is the elimination of Israel. Why would they
never said
get in a coalition with that if it's going
Okay.
to result in the destruction of something that's very important to many of them, where many of their friends and family live?
So with context, I'm not like elimination of Israel. I'm saying that given the situation that's happening in the world that's been going on, there is no plan for a two-state solution. It seems like there's only a plan for a one-state solution, and that one-state solution seems to be Israel. And then that's the only reason why I'm like, well, if there is going to only be a one-state solution, I'd prefer it to be Palestine. It's not that I want the elimination of Israel or Jews. However,
I apologize.
I'm not I tend to be a little bit more neutral in the situation. I tend to have conversations with people on both sides. Most of the time, people who disagree with me. I think it's important that we put the little nuance and differences aside and focus on the larger issue, which is people are dying on both sides, and the Jewish people feel with the Palestinian people, and a lot of Palestinian people do feel with the Jewish people, right? Not everyone is like an evil Zionist in the Palestinian mind. Right.
Sure.
So if these people got together, they put whatever differences they seem to have aside and actually fight against the common enemy that they have, I think that'd work out a lot better. I think these conversations are important.
Yeah. I hear you. I apologize for mischaracterizing your argument. Apparently,
No, it's okay.
I misunderstood that.
300 bits from Feder Methodist to ask Karl Marx, sorry. Would you oppose the BLM putting up posters of George Floyd in the UK as harmful propaganda?
I don't think that would really be necessary. I mean, I think it would be like silly in the same way. I don't think that people in the UK are going to affect American police-related policy, and I think the UK has its own issues with police, with its own people it could use as examples. I don't think you'd need to use George Floyd. I think that would be silly.
Fair enough.
I don't think it would be like worth ripping down or anything, because I don't think that they would actually like. Right? See, do you see what you're doing now? Do you see why I say that you're conflating Zionism with Judaism, basically?
If you don't mind, I'll tell you why I'm doing this, because I want to make it very clear what it actually is, right? I want to cut through the obfuscation, cut through the word salad, and I want to make okay, you would think it's weird when they rip down the George Floyd posters, but why don't you think it's weird when they rip down the Jewish posters? That's a question.
Well,
and I think that's something we have to, if your hatred or animosity towards Israel allows you to make excuses for anti-Semitism, maybe the anti-Israel sentiment isn't as disconnected from the anti-Jewish sentiment as you would like to believe. That's all.
Wait, do you think those posters can build any animosity towards Arabs or Muslims?
One at a time. First of all, to Max, I don't know. I have no idea. Do
you not understand my perspective? Do you truly not grasp it?
I just think it's one of those things where you can look at a situation and you can make... It's funny who we give charity to and who we do not. And I think it can tell a lot about someone when they give massive loads of charity towards one side, but refuse to give any towards another. And so this level of charity toward the people ripping down these posters is just several steps beyond.
I'm saying it's stupid, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who are driven by anti-Semitism. However, I do believe it's still genuinely propaganda. I think taking it down is a terrible optical move, however. I mean, it would be, but the issue is that it's not like state propaganda made by an already very, very powerful state, which Israel is. That's why I would treat it differently if it was something relating to police brutality in America, right? It's not like people who are anti-police brutality have like all the power in America or whatever. I think it's like kind of stupid, but it's less like, it's like unnecessary, but it's less an establishment kind of forcing their presence everywhere, right? It's just a little social movement. I don't care if it's the establishment or
not, honestly. Like this power dynamics thing is a little weird to me. I think that like we had more power than the Nazis. And that was a good thing. And I'm glad we've pressed the shit out of them, right? Like, so this power dynamics doesn't matter to me in a real way. But when it comes to like propaganda and when it comes to like influence and things, there's a lot of it on both sides that are going out, right? There's a lot of pro-Palestinian propaganda that's good, and there's a lot of pro-Israel propaganda that's sometimes also good, right? Sometimes it's negative in both sides. Like the propaganda that seeks to excuse Hamas, I denounce it. It's terrible. The propaganda that seeks to turn away from the authoritarian hellscape that Israel is, I denounce that as well. But we have to look at what this is. It's pictures of kids. It's pictures not even of Jewish. Some of them are American citizens, right? Yeah. And people are just ripping them off. And that's a problem to me. But I wanted to, we'll get back to it, but I want to address Ali's concern as well. And can you restate it just so I'm clear?
Right. You don't think that these posters could potentially breed like hatred for like Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians in America or in the lands that they're posting these pictures? Considering that they are kids, they're young kids, it's going to be a big emotional boost. It's going to turn people one way or the other, right?
I mean, if you're worried about anti-Semitism, sure. Like, if I may, I'm trying to phrase this correctly.
Yeah.
What happened October 7th is far more likely to do that than any of these posters ever will, right? If you're concerned about Islamophobia and things like that, let's look at what Hamas did, because Hamas did, and it's not an exaggeration to say, they performed a human fucking sacrifice on October 7th, because not only did they sacrifice 1,500 Jewish people, but they also were like, we don't give a shit if Palestinians get killed. We have sacrificed them, because they fucking knew what was going to happen. In fact, that's part of their strategy. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who said that, if Hamas hadn't done what we did, no one would be talking about the Palestinian situation. He didn't say this, but the implication was that what Hamas did actually served a purpose and was kind of good. And I reject that wholeheartedly, 100% denounce that. That is just terrible.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's not good to use these words. But like, yes, is there a possibility that seeing what Hamas did might turn people against Hamas? Sure. That's not what I'm talking about. That's true.
So there's a difference. So like we have an issue where we're conflating Hamas with Palestinians, and we're conflating anti-Zionists with anti-Semites, right? So when you post these pictures up and you have people in like an emotional distress, and they're looking at these pictures of missing kids, and who's taking these kids? It's the Hamas. And who is Hamas? Hamas or Palestinians? You're breeding hatred.
The posters don't say that.
Yeah. Sorry?
The posters don't say Palestinians captured them.
Yeah, but the people reading them don't. Let's not sit here and be like that. That's not the push. That's not what's happening when people are seeing them. We can't take away from that. I'm sorry. Like, you don't get to take away from that.
I don't think the answer is to try to censor that. I do think it's a fair concern that it
I don't think they should
trigger...
be censoring it. I'm just offering a little pushback to saying why people do. We acting like the only reason people are doing these types of things is because they're anti-Semitic. That's not the case. There is a reason why people are doing. There are emotional ties to what's going on. There is an issue that is happening, and if people do see it as propaganda to literally push more hatred towards Arabs and Muslims, yeah, I can understand why they would want to take that up. I'm not saying they should, but I can understand why they would. And the fact that people don't understand why they would and just completely relate it to anti-Semitism immediately is just a disservice.
So why not just not show what happened on October 7th? Because it might possibly breed contempt. Why are we not calling for the takedown of news organizations publishing pictures or photos or information about October 7th? Because it might breed contempt for the Palestinian people if people misunderstand. That's a silly thing to say.
The problem with like American media and Western media is that we do kind of really only show a lot of the Israeli side in the issues. Like I'm sure our feeds are completely different. I'm sure our messagings are completely different. I've seen enough Palestinian dead babies to be like, all right, cool. Like enough. No normal person should be seeing these. But I'm sure I can almost assume that a lot of the Western people aren't seeing them.
I hear you, but there was a video I watched today that I believe 120,000 people gave a like to, and it's on a college campus of these posters up, and you have two Muslim girls, and they're tearing them down, and a Jewish girl goes, "Why are you doing that?" And she turns around and she's like, "Hey, fuck Israel, and fuck you, and walks away. And that response, I don't think that was about like a principled stand against quote unquote propaganda that could result in, anti-Arab sentiment here in the United States.
Yeah, they don't like Israel and they don't like the person defending it.
That's exactly right. And I think that people are going to interpret that as anti-Semitism very clearly. Like the fact that the leftists, which is what this panel is about, is not calling out anti-Semitism on the left. It was more terrifying to me that 120,000 people liked that tweet, which is really about like someone that's Jewish, like going, this makes me uncomfortable. Hey, fuck that. Fuck you. Fuck Israel.
Well, they said fuck Israel and fuck you, but they didn't say fuck Jewish people. They didn't say anything. They didn't
say that, but the person they were saying it to is obviously the subtext.
So because someone is okay. So if it was like a Christian American that said that and they said fuck Israel and fuck you, would that then be anti-Christian, or what would that be?
No, of course not. But my message,
that's what I'm saying. That's not anti-Semitism.
I think you're pretending the very plain situation that exists is not existing, and I don't think it's intellectually.
I don't think it's
before we go on,
think...
I'll get you, I promise. But 5,000 bits from Principles Before Politics. 75% of Jews in the world live in the U.S. or Israel. What moral ground is it to stand on to say, hurting you a second time by showing disregard is an okay form of protest rather than empathy and humanitarian intervention? Are you not raising the heat?
That's right. It's really well said.
I don't understand.
Alessia, can you repeat that?
Okay. If you are going to protest for Israel, right, or protest Israel, what Israel is doing, why use that method to do so, which simply attacks Jewish individuals, citizens, and minimizes the harm that was done, not to the Israeli government, but to actual Jewish people?
Do you think people are seeing this as Jewish citizens that are affected, or do you think people are seeing it as like Israeli propaganda?
They see it as the citizens because that's who's on the poster, buddy.
Okay, so let me draw an analogy. It's easy to find like fight videos online, and it's easy to draw an analogy from that to like huge groups of people. But part of why fight videos are so insane is it's some random interaction between some person and like some other person. The analogy I'm drawing is that this is some random person, not an organized event, not a movement or whatever. And so it's easy to find like people being basically crazy or being insensitive maybe to like Israeli people or Jewish people. But there's a difference between that and like what organized movements are trying to do. And when you look at the organized movements of the left, they are overwhelmingly saying, call for a ceasefire, call your congressperson today. That's all I would try and say. There's a difference between like if an org was tearing down these things and a person.
But the problem is, right, it isn't just it's some rando, right, that's doing this, because I would 100% agree with you if we had seen this video and everyone had condemned it, or most people condemned it and just like, this is shitty, this is wrong, this is bad. But that's not what's happening, right? You've got people who stand up and not only defend it, but say it's good and we should do it more. And it gets, like Brianna said, 120,000 likes, I believe, maybe more than that. Like, it's people on the grassroots level, and this should concern us all, right? People on the grassroots level are saying, no, this is okay to do, and we don't give a fuck how many Jews get hurt. We're just going to protest Israel in this. Like, even if we grant you, right, Max, that this is just protesting Israel, right? The fact that they are just okay with hurting Jewish individuals like that to do so is anti-Semitic.
I think
the fact that you keep
doing
calling it like they're hurting
uncaringly.
Jewish individuals as if that's their intention is that's the part that's bothering me, man. You guys
doing it uncaringly and not being careful with the execution is a bad thing. If you're doing something like that, and I made a tweet about this earlier today and then deleted it because it flopped. But if you're doing that, you should take the opportunity when somebody records you, right, and actually try and explain what you're doing. Even if the person behind the camera doesn't understand, you should explain it to the camera, just so you don't look like a fucking idiot and an asshole who's just like swearing at people.
May I ask the panel, and you can say no if you'd like, right? But I have a Jewish individual who actually lives in Israel in chat right now, who, if they want to come on and kind of tell how it's affected them, I would love to have them and love to hear them, if that's okay with everyone. And you can tell them that this is to their face, right? That this is just propaganda.
Do I go and get my Jewish friends as well, and then they can like battle out like Pokemon? I don't really see the benefit to that.
As the only like,
no, if you don't want it to happen, that's fine.
Middle Eastern guy on the panel?
I don't know. That feels like a weird thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah, Yeah, so like it's just gonna be him yelling at me and me defending my peeps. It's like I don't know. Sure, you can bring him on, but like
Okay,
it's
fair
not gonna
enough.
make me feel anyway.
It.
Sorry, Mono. We'll have to sit
I
this
would
one out.
I would just draw a comparison between something that Max said and like just stop oil. There's a difference between like just splashing oil on a paint building, which is usually not very effective, and then when you're getting filmed for doing that, you're trying to get your message out there. And like there's a lot of easy criticism of just stop oil that like even the way they do it is really annoying to people and actually turns people away from their message, but they're still trying to like maximize their positive impact. I think very clearly you're just seeing people who are pissed at the poster. That I think because they're pissed at the situation in Palestine, and I would say a lot of this is actually emotional reaction rather than like a planned left movement. Or I would also say it's not a high-minded criticism of Israel per se. It's just, I would say all of this is really pure emotion.
Yeah. And it's killing our solidarity, and it's going to result of the Republicans in charge.
Does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone think that well, first of all, let me ask you this. Who here thinks Biden and his administration has actually handled this situation well? I do.
I do.
What? Do you do?
No, I'm good.
Absolutely.
So like
What about
coming from a city of people who like went Trump and went Biden and went both, the whole like voting thing is kind of like picking the lesser of two evils is kind of being less it's not the move. No one wants to do that. No, everyone's kind of over it. We voted for Biden. It just doesn't work, man. Sorry.
Wait, what do you think would have happened had Trump been in office right now?
That point, maybe would have been worse. We don't know.
Maybe we don't know.
Trump would have
been worse.
Trump would have been worse, absolutely. But Biden has been so bad. Back on October 18, the only vote on the United States Security Council to oppose a ceasefire was the United States. Just for an idea of how bad it is, it's only us standing with Israel, like literally. We are the sole thing keeping it going.
There was no history where there was no future for the United States where we were not going to stand with Israel. If you look at the polls, a lot of Americans, they either think that Biden has done enough to support Israel or has not done enough to support Israel or has done just about the right amount to support Israel.
But Brianna,
support Israel without like supporting the death of Palestinians, right?
I agree with you.
Let's disagree with all their numbers that human rights orgs have told us are probably accurate, right?
Voting
is about a choice. Try to convince me that like it's a good move.
Hold on. One at a time.
Voting is about a choice between policy outcomes. It's not about voting for utopia. This shit is cancer on the left.
Yeah, so why would
I'm going to finish what I'm saying. There's a real sense on the left that we're going to aim for utopia and demand utopia rather than boring, slow, incremental change. My read of Biden's statements has been an astonishing acknowledgement of the overreaction towards Palestine and the deaths. I've seen him holding Netanyahu to account in ways I would not have guessed he'd be willing to go. So I think if you look at his statements through the lens of the United States and our history, I think they've actually been very strongly. I think they're the best I could have hoped for, to be honest.
I wanted to. Go on, please. Sogdan, then Karl Max. Go ahead.
No, just there's so much that Biden could have done that he has not done. Today was the first day that he supported a humanitarian pause publicly because a woman yelled at him until he did so. Like a Jewish rabbi stood up and had to yell at him to get him to support a humanitarian pause.
All I would say about this. Wait, that's not true. His administration has called several times for a pause, not a ceasefire, but a pause to let humanitarian aid in. This was as early as a fucking. I want to say the 14th or the 15th, right?
And what has he done to achieve that? So what I would say is this, you're correct. He has continued to oppose a ceasefire. He did support a humanitarian pause earlier, but then like days after he supported the first humanitarian pause, he voted against the ceasefire. And I know the point of this is supposed to be that there's some grand difference between the two, but come the fuck on. There's thousands of people dying every other day. 1,000 people die.
I want to touch on this because I read an interesting article, not an article, but a thread from a professor in Tel Aviv, a member of the leftist movement in Israel, and he made and I'll just be very brief on this, but he said, "I've always wanted an immediate ceasefire in every round of fighting between Israel and Palestine in the last 20 years. However, like almost the entirety of the Israeli left, we think that a ceasefire is not an option And he lists a bunch of reasons why. One being that there is no way to curtail Hamas without military action. The idea wherein gradual cooperation with Hamas may be built using diplomacy or withdrawals was simply proved wrong. Israel cannot continue to exist with an Iran proxy, ISIS-like religious fundamentalist organization sworn to kill all of the Jews in Israel that continues to amass military power, which allows it to do what it intends to do. And there's no hope for peace between Israel and Palestine while Hamas continues to amass power. And without its continual suicide bombings, there would have been peace circa 1996, following the Oslo Accords. Without Hamas, Gaza would thrive after Israel left. So I don't think it's necessarily anti-Palestine to oppose the ceasefire. Now, we could disagree on that. I think righteous minds could disagree. But I also want to get to the money I'm about to make right now by reading my super chats.
Oh my god.
I know. $10 from Artemis Fowl. Why is the left surprised with Muslims wanting the death of Jews and Israelis? What gave you the indication that there was anything other than an alliance of convenience among Progs? And £10 from Big Hoth. Leftists have been going on for years about how anyone who's ever seen a Pepe meme is a member of the Waffen SS, but now can't even make light inferences when it's people they agree with.
So the Muslim bit is interesting because Muslims in the United States are about as liberal on social issues as are, I want to say, I think they're about as liberal as the median American voter. Like they're not this like uniquely conservative group. So yes, and to some degree, alliance of convenience in some countries, but also like that's to some degree true with a lot of groups. I don't know, that this seems like the inherent wedge thing that conservatives do all the time because they want to try and win back the Muslim voters for their own purposes.
I feel like there's a fundamental, like, I am often frustrated with the Democratic Party on, say, trans issues, right? Like, Biden has been directionally much more weak about standing for trans rights than, say, even the Obama administration was, which was much more bold with policies with schools and expanding healthcare, right? I also look at the environment we're in and I go, what is it feasible that the Democratic Party can do? And I hear you that in an ideal world, what you would want the Biden administration to do, I think that those are options that are just not feasible in the United States system because of the polls I've just cited. Americans directionally do agree with this policy of supporting Israel, and there are a lot of very powerful forces to fund politicians and reward politicians when they are friendly to Israel policies. That's just a reality in the United States. So I think looked at through that lens of what is reasonable to hope for, look at Biden's public statements. They've been tremendously hard on Netanyahu. And additionally, I would have to say, if you believe that someone yelling at Biden caused him to freak out and suddenly change policy, that is a fool's dream. That was in the works with the State Department, which is the most slow-moving apparatus you could possibly imagine in Washington. They've been looking at polls. They've been deciding what the right thing is, and that's why he made those statements, not because of something that happened on TV.
I don't doubt that this was a slower moving thing, but the thing that's brought it to the fore is that he's been consistently getting people shitting on him in the media, in person, demanding a ceasefire is all I would try and say. And as a second point, I think I just wanted to get at like a larger idea of your theory of change and how theory of politicians should behave. You seem to be saying it's popular, and this is the limits of where popularity goes, so we can't do more than that. And I strongly reject that. There is some degree to which politicians can affect public opinion. The term is something like policy entrepreneur. You can shift policy by putting an idea into people's minds. Biden could have been doing that by yelling from the rooftop, humanitarian ceasefire, from day one, but he didn't. He took weeks. He could have been bringing up how many Palestinians died, but he didn't. He said that he didn't trust the numbers, on and on throughout the point. He has not been going as left as possible. He's in like the center of the Democratic Party. That's all.
I agree with that. And I think
and after Wu, I want to hear from Max and Alan.
Sure. So the reality of politics in the United States is the people that show up, the people that vote, the people that donate money, the people that put together PACs and other organizations to give infrastructure for politicians are the ones that get their policy passed. So I agree with what you're saying, but I also think it's true that just strategically for a president that is as far down in the polls as Biden is, I don't think it would be a very good move for him. So if we're serious about getting this policy to change, my theory of change is we try to turn down the fucking temperature because the conversation right now is literally insane. We try to focus on the things we can all agree on, which is that civilian deaths are a tragedy and that needs to be minimized. And we try to form a coalition to demand a different relationship with how the United States enables violence in that region and ask for more accountability. That is my theory for change.
I think that Biden has become increasingly critical of Netanyahu, especially over the recent developments with the UN constantly being like, hey, this is actually really fucked up. I think through that they've changed more, and I think he was much less openly critical before, and I think now he just barely is. Yeah, no, I can't remember if I had any other excess points there, but to act as if Biden had to do what he did with voting against the ceasefire when there are tons of other countries with similar polling to America in terms of support for Zionism, I think is entirely false.
I don't agree.
I would just
No.
point out that supporting Israel and supporting Zionism are two separate things. Let's not conflate the two. I want to go to Ali.
Oh, wait, are they not the same thing? Zionists are just Israel deserves to have the homeland, right? What's the difference? Just before I go on.
Okay, so Zionism, as I understand today, is Israel, no Palestine. Israel takes it all. The settlers, the Zionists support the settlements in the West Bank. I don't think you can. I don't think you have to support that to support Israel.
I think that's just like if you support Israel, that's just what you support as Palestinians not existing. But I mean, so like to the vote thing, right? So like, what do you want someone like me, who is pro-Palestinian, Lebanese Muslim, and watching Biden give X amount of money to Israel like regularly, standing with Israel, saying they have the right to defend themselves, and then like, so how am I supposed to be like, oh well, I'm gonna go vote this year for Biden or any other president when it's like clearly my interests aren't? And if the American public stands with Israel, how do you want people that are pro-Palestinian to feel? How do we feel not like that we don't matter to the world, that we don't that we're not like we're in the West, Arabs are looked at as savages and barbaric. So it's like I don't know how you want us to feel and what we're supposed to do about that.
I would never tell you how to
understand
feel.
empathy
I
I empathize with the Jewish people because we're going through it. So like I don't understand why what would you want us to do?
I'm not going to tell you how to feel. And I acknowledge your pain. I hope on this panel you felt respected. And I hope you feel like I've acknowledged all of that. But the calculus, again, voting is about a decision between policy outcomes in the exact same way that trans people are really angry at the Democratic Party for a lot of really good reasons about like doing a lot of showboating about how much they care about LGBT people. But when it comes to policy, they're not going to do jack shit, in the same way that women are really, really angry at the Democratic Party for counting on us for votes and not doing shit about Roe versus Wade. We still have a calculus to make. Is Trump going to be better for us, or is Biden going to be better for us? And it sucks. I 100% get it. But voting it's like taking out the garbage. It's a thankless civic duty about what you want the policy outcome to be. Yeah.
So we go vote and nothing changes. How are people supposed to feel?
My suggestion is let's build a coalition. I've said that at least 20 times today.
Okay.
Are you a single issue voter though? There are so many like things that are going to be influenced by that, right? Like also, especially if you are Arab, like Trump's Muslim country, immigration ban, right? Like that's a huge thing that would be different.
Yeah.
Okay. This is to SDL. So $50 to SDL.
$50.
$50. What the fuck is a ceasefire on their words, not mine. What the fuck is a ceasefire on day one, SD fucking L? What exactly does that look like? Answer that, please.
Sure. So Israel announced that they wanted to move 1.4 million people to the south. If you want to do something like that, you have to set up a humanitarian means for people to do so. Israel only gave people something on the order of 2 days to get from North Gaza to South Gaza and bring all of their shit with them. So what does a ceasefire look like? Well, maybe there's some initial bombings, and then you have to give people time to get out. If the argument is civilians in the north can't be there, there's going to be too many casualties if they're there for the ground invasion, so we got to get them out. Okay, let them into Israel. Let them into like tent cities that you've built up. like build refugee camps. That's the answer.
Do you think it's, do you
at
think that
minimum.
was a like letting them into Israel after October 7th was at any way, shape, or form going to happen? Like, I don't.
Politically feasible, probably not. But what's morally just? Like, the response to, hey, a horrible thing has happened to our country is not, we're going to start randomly bombing and killing like
Do you think
hundreds
it
and
was
hundreds
random?
of civilians.
Do you think
Sorry,
they're
I
just
shouldn't say
random?
random.
Like,
I
first
should
of all,
say
no, I reject this
poorly
idea that
targeted-
Israel is just indiscriminately, randomly bombing just hither and thither.
So-
I just don't think they're doing
They
that.
are.
I think
We
very
don't yet know
targeted.
whether it's indiscriminate or
literally
we don't yet know whether it's indiscriminate or whether they're just failing to account for collateral damage.
No,
Essentially,
it's indiscriminate. I have
indiscriminate.
no problem saying it's indiscriminate. What are we even talking about?
Indiscriminate would just mean like, say, like they're just randomly bombing, or they're like, this might
No,
be a
wait.
target, but we haven't
Yeah, I think
confirmed.
they're just bombing whatever they want to bomb.
Really?
Yeah.
Ollie, so
Yeah.
you think there's an Israeli plane flying over right now, and they see a house, right? And they're just like, fuck it. We don't care if Hamas is there.
What
Just
benefits
bomb
do they
that
have
shit.
in
Yeah,
bombing a
it's
school?
essentially.
No,
What military
I just-
target
No,
do you think was
they
at school? Do you think they've got
they
like a
have
scary
intelligence.
11-year-old?
I'm sorry. How many Hamas members have they killed?
We don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. How are we going to stop Hamas? How do you stop a people when you don't know who the people are? You don't know how to target them. You're bombing the buildings because you think you think Hamas is in the building. So then the whole building goes down. So all of those people are now displaced and destabilized. Yeah, they're bombing indiscriminately.
If they were bombing indiscriminately, we would see a casualty number. You'd add a couple zeros on what we got now. Okay.
Why? They're just doing it slow. What's the issue? This has
I
always
think-
been. It's been a slow ethnic removal of the Palestinian people.
Also,
They can't do it
almost
quickly because
4,000
the
is so
world
much.
would snap.
Say one more
They
time.
cannot do it
To act as
quickly.
if the numbers aren't huge already is also insane. Like,
But there's a
it's
but.
been
No,
4,000 since
wait.
October
There
7th.
are far too many. I want to be clear. There are far too many civilian deaths in Gaza. Far, far, far too many. Even one is far too many. But to act as if they were going to just wipe out the Gazans, that it wouldn't be not 4,000, but 400,000 is wild to me. And I think that
No, they
just
just do
shows this
1,000 a day.
Well, I mean, this is
anti-Semitic,
just 1
like,
month.
this bias, right, that we have.
It's been 1
I
month,
think if
dude.
you want to be critical of the United States policy, like be critical of the fact, I have no doubt that we are providing Israel with satellite coverage and intelligence infrastructure. I have no doubt that after, Leviathan, one of the things when I ran for office is I really wanted a cybersecurity warfare program, right? It's not really reported here in the United States. After 9/11, we had the Leviathan program, which goes into like every email cloud infrastructure on earth. I just assume that's much more powerful today. If you don't think that the United States intelligence apparatus is working hand in hand with Israel to find targets of people for them to go kill, I think that you would be very foolish to not assume that.
So just a
What I
question,
would
just
point to, just as a
with your
comparison.
opinion, what do you think the percentage of civilians to Hamas is being like? What do you think the percentage is?
Well, given that
it's atrocious, 100 to 1.
What's the ratio do you guys think it is? Just like with all the intelligence that Israel has and all the them being discriminate, what's the percentage do you think? What's
I
the
would
ratio?
probably ballpark guess maybe 50 or 100 to 1, which is beyond unacceptable. But
So
it's not.
that's indiscriminate bombing.
that
That's
I-
to me
I
that
don't
is
agree.
indiscriminate bombing.
What,
It is.
what I would point to is that the data on the breakdown of gender and age of those killed so far is such that the maximum possible of military aged men killed is about 1 in 5 of those dead. So the maximum rate is about like 1 to 4 of like Hamas or whatever. If every single of the young men was killed was in Hamas, to like all the total deaths would be 4. So just like that.
I hear you, but one of the things that makes this very difficult, and I'm not justifying this, I'm explaining it. One of the things that makes this difficult, I think, to do targeted warfare is the fact that there are no military bases for Hamas in this region. There's no like airfield. There's no, army camp that they can go bomb. It's all civilian infrastructure. All of it. And I think
Hamas is such a threat if they have no
understand.
military, no bases, no
understand.
anything. It's such a threat.
They are a threat, and I think you're really minimizing the horror that's happened there. But what I was going to say is, I think that there's this bad stereotype on both sides with this, where people want to say that, Hamas is hiding out in civilian areas to target and forcing Israel to target them. And then Israel will say the opposite thing. It's like, oh, you're indiscriminately bombing people. I think the fact is that these are people, like, this is textbook insurgent warfare, something the United States did not learn lessons from after Iraq. And there's a tragic calculus that goes on when you're having urban warfare with the insurgency, and that cost is far too high, and this bombing is just not a tactic that's going to work.
Well, so to speak to that, of studies of like the number of like militants in Afghanistan after we bombed, the effect on the number of militants was almost nil. Like for all the bombing we did, it didn't in the long run hurt the Taliban. They bounced back, they recovered. So I guess I guess
we had a war on terrorism that created
terrorists. Only gonna end up joining the Taliban because they're so like the young people. So like with the discriminate bombing that's happening, you're killing a bunch of people. You're killing a bunch of people's parents. You're having kids being raised, and then they're not going to turn to Hamas when like they have no money, no food, no water, no anything. No, they have nothing left to lose. Why? Like I don't get how.
But they're doing that.
We learned this lesson we didn't learn this lesson after 9/11. You can't fight terrorism by doing tactics that create terrorists.
I mean, I think
but no. I would just last 20 years on repeat, and it's killing me.
Okay, I'm just going to step in here because we absolutely have decimated Al Qaeda, ISIS. There's been we have torn down these structures, and they're much less of a threat. So
we destroyed ISIS because ISIS was a state. But the point on the Taliban and whatnot was that the effect of bombing. So there's attempts to try and derive causality from this. When you bomb, there's like next week there's less rates of there's like a slightly lower rate of terrorism, but it goes up the next week, like right back to what it was. It's not a solution to terrorism in any long run amount. That's all I was trying to get at.
But without it, like for example, Hamas indoctrinates, and like I think we forget this. They use child soldiers, right? Like they strap bombs to their chests and send them out to do their martyrdom operations, right? This happens. We've seen that in the Second Intifada, right? We saw it all throughout the history. So to act as like everything that was done to the Jewish people on October 7th, Hamas first did to the Palestinians in Gaza. Like Hamas has to go. There is no world. There is no situation where Palestinian can be free. Palestine will never be free while Hamas exists and rules over them.
I agree.
They were never going to be free while Israel existed. So what's the difference?
The difference is we can change Israel through diplomatic means. We cannot do so through Hamas.
Why did Hamas come about?
Well, it's worth thinking about, what if the United Nations had a shit ton more money? What if there were UN peacekeepers there? UN peacekeeping works in other countries. When we give them a shit ton of money, a shit ton of bodies, why not put them in? We can't trust Israel. Like, literally, we can't trust Israel to be responsible in this. Put someone else in charge.
Like, you know what?
In the same way
I'm actually okay with that.
You blame Hamas for the Palestinian deaths, you can blame Israel for the Israeli deaths. I don't get how that doesn't work, how that doesn't make sense for you.
Especially Israel has propped up Hamas intentionally. So
yes, this is I keep meaning to say this, but that's like huge, right?
I don't know what you want of people with no land, no government, no resources to do, like when they're just living in a literal open air prison. What do you want them to do? They've been bombed for years. They've been displaced for
not
years.
Kill children.
To do? What's the response?
Not kill children. That's what I want them to do. Not kill children.
So you want them to just fuck off and leave? That's fine. I'm with that. But besides them fucking off and leaving, what do they do?
And you are ignoring the billions of dollars that they get from Iran, Qatar, and other things. Like Hamas,
Hamas gets that money. Palestinians don't.
I understand, but Hamas recruits amongst the Palestinians, right? That's where they get the recruits from.
Who else would they recruit amongst?
Okay, exactly. So what I'm saying is that the quasi de facto government of Gaza right now is Hamas. And until we get rid of them, Palestine, Gazans, they will never be free.
So we create a situation where people go into terrorism and then say we have to get rid of the
I'm not saying that what the IDF is doing right now is wise or good. One of the problems with what the IDF is just as what you're saying, that it is not going to fix the problem. And I think SDL's, I don't know about the UN doing it, right? But a third party coming in, right? And sitting on both of them and saying, no, you will stop killing each other is a very fine idea. The problem with that, realistically, is that's going to be a hugely expensive and time-consuming project, and I don't think anyone has the will to do that. It would
How
be
much
nice
money
if
does
they
America
did,
throw
but
at
no one wants
Israel
to fuck around
anyways
with
right
that.
now?
I mean, we spend like $4 billion a year in
So like,
military
why
aid to
not just
Israel
take some of
proper.
that and allocate it
Yeah.
to like a peace process? I don't like.
I think I think I ran the numbers, and you could afford to give every single Gazan a job with the amount of money we give to Israel.
It's insane. Like,
I-
and then to talk about why people are angry and why people are taking down posters and why people are like pro-Palestinian or like pro-terrorism. It's like they're not pro-terrorism. But if every single time people want to defend Palestine, people want to explain what happened, and everyone just goes, yeah, but you know the atrocities on October the 7th. Yes, but what about the atrocities for the past 75 years that led to the atrocity of October the 7th?
I
No one
again-
hear you on
we
that.
keep acting like this just happened yesterday.
We
No,
aren't.
No one
Again,
on this panel is acting like this just happened. yesterday.
Kind of.
they have been killing each other, and this one-sided thing. Like, why do you think Netanyahu got into power in the first place? Who did
That's right.
that? Who
That's right.
drove the Israeli people? Because remember, in 2000, the left in Israel won election, right? With the on the issue of ending the settlements. That was what they won on. What did Hamas do? They started blowing people up. Right? During the Oslo Accords, both Likud killed Ravin, the Jewish extreme right killed Ravin, but you know what else was going on? The Hamas equivalent at the time was blowing people up. So to act as if Israel is just doing this because they hate the Palestinians is wild to me. Why can you see and give like a nuance and context and charity to the people who are wanting their freedom in Gaza, but not look at Israel and see all the depredations and degradations and everyone around them wanting them to die, to literally be killed, and not say, well, you know, maybe I can kind of understand while they're keeping these people in a prison,
because
right?
while Gazans and West Banks have been living in oppression for years, what's been happening? Israel has funding, they have infrastructure, they have schools, they have jobs, they have shit they can do. Versus the Palestinian people who don't even get recognized as Palestinians anymore. Now people are being recognized as Gazans. We're not even saying Palestine. The literal Palestine was wiped
Because
off
there's
the
a
map,
big difference.
literally. So yes,
There's a
that's why
big difference between what's happening in the Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank. And to just say Palestinians isn't going to help me actually actively communicate with you, right? Because talking about what's
Understood.
happening in the West Bank is a far different cry where there is no
Yes,
Hamas
right.
and what's happening in Gaza. So the reason I say Gazans is to, again, indicate this specific thing. And the reason why Israel has all this infrastructure is because their government didn't just pour their money into rockets to kill Jews, right? Like, that's not all that happened. So Hamas, again, has been given tons of aid, tons of resources, not just from Iran, but also from other legit countries.
That's correct.
But they have used that, again, they have victimized the Gazans and the other people of Palestine by not using that to improve their conditions, but instead using that to create weapons of war and perpetuate this conflict. So, yes, Israel has all the blame in the world, but the fucking Hamas, like the other actors in this, not just Hamas, the PLO, Arafat, there's a tons of actors on the Palestinian side whose hands are soaked in blood.
How are the
too.
Gazans going to take the money to build infrastructure? Where do they get the means to build their infrastructure from?
From the money that they get.
Yeah, okay, so you have a bunch of cash. Where are you going to get the wood, the cement, the
You
skills,
start-
training? Where does all this come from?
Let me give you an answer to this. First of all, we ruthlessly hunt down and kill Hamas terrorists. That's job number one. Then after that, we learned some lessons from the Iraq War and how to fight insurgency. You cannot win in a war against an insurgency if you don't have a clear political aim. And I would posit that maintaining the Palestinian people and getting them a state that is free and independent and functional economically, meaning having trade partnerships with other people in the region, hopefully with Israel itself, all of that thing. That is the path forward.
That's
is
a beautiful
the way for economics.
That's a beautiful ideal. I'm with you.
Okay, but right now what we have is a situation where I don't think Israel's acting in accordance with the law and how they're handling this insurgency, which I think is counterproductive. So what we have to do is, as best as I can tell from what I've read from Israel and Netanyahu, I don't see a very clear defined political goal. This is where America fucked up in Iraq. We went to war without an exit strategy, without a clearly defined goal, except kill Saddam Hussein. So we've got to force them to fight as insurgents instead of with conventional military tactics, we've got to cut down their supply lines. We've got to use network-centric warfare to like target individuals. We need to use more special forces to go hunt down and kill Hamas. But it's got to be one thing after the other. We can't leave Hamas in power.
Yeah.
We got to go kill those motherfuckers.
So like
and
I
then
said,
we can
that's a
talk
nice-
about the economy.
That's a nice ideal, but more to Wick's point when he said that Hamas is getting all this funding and they were supposed to build infrastructure.
They
and
built
do all
tunnels.
Huh?
It's not a deal. That's a plan. What's your fucking plan? Because all you keep doing is going back and adjudicating the last 200 years of history, which I agree is shit. But we are now in 2023. What is your fucking plan?
I can't have a plan based on ideals. You have to look at the situation as it is, and we can only talk about what is happening.
So what is happening? What's your plan? You're in charge of Gaza.
I don't know what
I
you
got
want me
like
to do with
15, 20 minutes left in me, by the way. I'm
No, we're gonna end soon.
Right.
We got it. I
Same.
understand. But
Does
Ali,
someone else have a plan that's
No,
different than
no,
mine?
so just-
I would love to hear it.
yeah,
You're
in charge of Gaza, gang. You're in charge
I
of
don't know
Gaza.
what
What do
plan
you
you
do?
want me to
How do you
give.
fix it?
How do you
First-
fix this?
You give humanitarian aid to the Gazans first of all. Israel has to be the peacemaker in this. Israel has to be the one that goes in and talks to Hamas and tries to broker an actual peace agreement. They're going to have to be the ones that do this. They're the ones in power. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the infrastructure. They're the ones with the government. They're the ones they are the ones who can do it. So to sit here and look at me and tell me, well, Hamas can't exist, and why do they exist? I understand that Hamas can't exist. I agree with you that it is a terrorist organization. But in my mind, the IDF and the Israeli are also a terrorist organization. So like, what is that? Why'd you oof?
I don't think Israel is a terrorist organization.
Why? To the people that are living in the lands around them, why?
Because, well, for starters, they're a government and not an organization. And I think the overall direction of Israel is not to achieve their political aims by creating terror.
But they do create terror.
But that's not their primary mission objective.
Just because they don't say it's their mission doesn't mean that their actions don't show that that's
not
their
the
mission.
primary tactic that they use.
Well, how do you claim that?
If you look at their economy, if you look at their role in the world, Israel has a really big outsized impact right now with the AI and a lot of technology like
So that means they're not terrorists to the people in their lands?
I'm saying that their economy is one of the things that Israel does, and the interdependency that has is part of their national security strategy. It's not just terror, it's economic intermingling. They participate through this State Department, through the diplomatic process. There's all number of things that they do.
Okay.
I guess all I would say is when we point to like countries that the United States calls rogue countries or terrorist states or whatever, they're countries like North Korea and Iran that also try and do similar things. Like I don't know that I would call Israel a terrorist state. I would call some of the things that Israel has done terrorist actions, like state terrorist actions. But all I'm trying to say is like the term terrorist, the U.S. has applied to states, and like many scholars have applied to states, is all that do the things you're talking about.
I know that we are kind of circling the drain on this, and 8 o'clock is coming up. I want to read a couple more super chats, and then we'll get to closing statements. For those of you who want to stay, you're welcome to stay. We'll take call-ins, but if you have to go, I understand. So let me read these, and then we'll get to those closing statements. $5 from Temperance Quill. For your info, the rockets Israel is using do not have targeting capabilities. They are taking the chance they might take something out. $5
is.
Oh, go ahead.
The rocket is an unguided thing. The missiles that Israel is using are largely guided. Just
I'm honestly not sure. So fair enough. Artemis Fowl from $5. Letting that dude play both sides during this panel is delicious. Just come out and say Hamas is right and good.
He's talking about me.
I think
Fuck
so.
off.
I would guess.
you can fuck
$5 from Skilltree Gaming. The same way they get munitions through tunnels. I'm assuming that's how they're going to get the wood, labor, cement.
yeah, moving the log through the tunnel. They actually did a video on one of those. You have to like crouch down inside them. They're tiny little things.
Fair enough. But
bringing in like
how big
my
do you think
industrial
rockets are,
equipment.
buddy?
I mean, I don't know that's where they make them. That if you trust like the thing that Israel produced of like Hamas people picking up water pipes, which was never confirmed to be clear,
Yeah, I don't
but they were doing that all in the open. So apparently they don't need to, right? So I don't know.
Okay. With that, gang, it has been a heated discussion, but I think a productive discussion nonetheless.
Yeah, I've liked this.
What we got coming up before we toss it over to these guys and give them closing statements. So I'm not doing anything tomorrow. I'm taking a day off. Monday, we're going to be talking about the new Speaker of the House, whether that's a good choice or not. And then on the 10th, Brianna Wu will be meeting with a short fat otaku, or Dev, and they're going to be having a wonderful one-on-one discussion. And we'll see if we can build a bridge or burn a bridge. I don't know what'll happen, but it'll be fun.
I think we're friends. I think it'll be good. I
It'll
think
be fun.
A good
Are you going to be confrontational, Brianna? Are you going to confront him about the like shit he says and the positions he changes? Because I feel
I've
like
got
he's
some
done that a lot.
examples from his videos that I think are disingenuous, and I'm going to bring examples. But it's going to be friendly.
Yeah. And 16th, the 16th is a big one, gang. Okay, the 16th is what you want to going to tune in for. Okay, we're going to have No Opinion, one of the, I think, the largest Substacker, and we're going to have him talk with SDL and Brianna Wu here.
Do we even know what's the topic?
Israel and Palestine. He wants to talk to you. He quoted you in his latest blog piece. Did you see that?
He did. He called me an activist, socialist grassroots.
Yes.
What does that even mean? I tweet.
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out. It'll be fun. But no, it'll be a great discussion, I think. I'm excited to have this guy on. He's a great guy. He drives discourse in a way, and I haven't seen him on anything, so I'm really excited for that. But let's give it to my people here, my wonderful guests, and I love you all, to be clear, even though I had some heated words for you. And let's start with Ali. Go ahead.
All right, I just want to say I hope no one was offended by any of the things that were said on the panel. That wasn't the point. The point is to have a proper discussion. So appreciate you guys for having that. The second point, for all my people who are pro-Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, whatever, avoid the anti-Semitism. It really just defeats your whole goal. It defeats your whole cause. It does nothing for you but make you look bad and just honestly minimize the message that we're trying to push, which is ultimately a peaceful message. And free Palestine. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Oh, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. I'm on Twitter. I've been tweeting. It's fun.
Okay.
This is my first year, my first like 3 months using Twitter. It's
really?
Yeah, I've been a member since 2017. I just never used it.
You're going to be so much crazier 9 months from now. Oh my gosh.
It's all going to go downhill this way.
I do want to appreciate you for hosting these panels. Brianna, hopefully the bridge was built rather than burned.
No, I enjoyed this.
Okay. Amazing.
I enjoy talking to people I disagree with, or at least don't understand, because it helps me come up with better positions, genuinely.
Speaking of Brianna Wu.
So I really appreciated this conversation tonight. I think this is literally the best, most productive conversation I've had on this. It's certainly better than Twitter. I do want to say I'm a little disturbed by some of the, I think there's been a lot of minimizing of Jewish pain on this panel today, but I think it's done with good intentions, or at least I understand where it's coming from. I want to be really clear policy-wise. I enthusiastically endorse hunting down and killing Hamas terrorists. And I think after we do that, we can have a conversation about how to create a two-state solution that's more stable for everyone involved. I think this current situation is untenable. It's going to result in more Israeli death, and I think it treats Palestinian life like it's disposable. But I think the very first step to that is unifying and hunting and killing Hamas terrorists. So I hope everyone on this panel supports me in that goal.
Well, thanks for being here, Brianna. I really appreciate you, and we're looking forward to seeing what the future days have in store. Next up, Karl Marx.
So I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was interesting to talk over. I think that we should rehash the importance of not conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, as it's something I believe is anti-Semitic in itself and flies in the face of anti-Zionist Jews as well, especially. But I think that we had a pretty productive conversation. I think we reached some mostly decent conclusions. But I do continue to request that people second guess their beliefs. This includes me and people on my side. Second guess your beliefs. Try and figure out if you might just be falling into some terrible line of thinking. See if you might be falling for propaganda. And try and be self-conscious and not too sure of yourself. Because if you're wrong, and you're wrong on a topic like this, where you're going in really hard, you're going to look awful. So just, do what you know is right, and stick to that and be measured. That's all. Oh, yeah, you can find me at Twitter. I'm 𝕘𝖍𝖎𝖙 on there. You might have seen me. At 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. Brianna and SDL, you should both follow me back, by the way. Okay, now that I'm talking to you,
drop your Twitter in
What's the deal?
Same here, guys.
Okay. Yeah.
Look,
everyone,
I'm not gonna talk about
everyone.
him, but,
by the way, Ali, if you could drop your Twitter tag in my Twitch chat as well. There's some people asking for that. There.
How do I do that?
Yeah, you better
just go to my
mine
Twitch
as
chat
well.
and type out the exact spelling.
What, you haven't been watching 𝕬𝖑's entrancing panel on twitch.tv/𝕬𝖑?
I need all of you to understand. This is my first time using laptop streaming or any of these services. I
got you. You're a newbie. You're doing well. You're doing great. You're
a spiritual boomer.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Oh, no.
Just real quick, check out 𝕘𝖍𝖎𝖙. I think he's one of the more reasonable voices on his side. And to echo his sentiment, my original channel name was Death of Certainty. Because I too think we should stop being so certain about our beliefs and look into alternatives and things like that. But no, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Last but certainly not least,
Thanks for having me.
𝐸𝑐_done_left.
Hey, I'm 𝐸𝑐_done_left. I'm streaming right now. You can find me at 𝐸𝑐_done_left.org/live. I can post a link to that. The other thing that I would recommend doing, it seems like everyone in this panel, and hopefully all the audience agree, that there's a huge humanitarian crisis going on in Palestine right now, and you can support to try and help that through the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. I'm going to post a link to that. It goes directly aid to Palestinian children, of whom 700,000 are displaced, and about, I think it's 3,000 have been killed so far. They are very, very much the victims of this. They had no choice in the matter. Whatever you think of Hamas, Israel, whatever, these children are hurting, and they're completely innocent. I guess just as a closing remark, I would say that anti-Semitism is a problem. I think it's a problem on the left, less so than on the right, but very much a problem on the left. It's always good to call out problems, even if they're on the same side or whatever. However, I do think it's important to try and proportion our criticism to where the power is and where the harm is in the real world. So all I would say is that institutionally, the right has been saying horrific anti-Palestinian things all across the United States, all across Israel, and they're the ones currently leading an enormous amount of death. And I think that's where the focus of the left should be. Fine to criticize left anti-Semitism, just make sure at the end of the day, you are throwing some of that shade at Israel.
Okay.
SDL, I appreciate you for actually having a charity or something that you can reference and refer people to while you're having this conversation. That's actually really, really good.
It's PCRF. I posted the link in chat, so if y'all want to give some to Palestinian children,
please do. Check it out, gang. Check it out. Okay. Anything else before I let you guys go?
I'm good to go.
Okay.
With
that, we're just probably gonna cut it out. We'll rate out. Sorry, people backstage. This took a lot out of me. I am pretty exhausted. But gang, we got some great shit coming up next week. Tune in Monday, and we'll see you then. We're gonna rate out. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Take care, folks.
Bye.
Ciao, guys.
It takes a minute. Give it a second. Give it a second. I have to wait that. There's a way to lose the starting time. I just haven't figured it out. Anyway.
Bye, Wick. Thanks for the panel.
Peace out, Wick, man. It was a great time.
Yep.
See ya.